Hey there, Internet. Welcome to 2022. Thought I'd make a quick recap of 2021. Did a whole bunch of videos. I think I did about 30 videos. Actually, that's not a whole bunch of videos, but I did about 30 videos. The top videos were my decal cutter arm review, which got an amazing amount of views. Because it was my most popular video, this grinder arm, I thought I'd give a quick update. Pulled it apart just to figure out how to mount this in a more permanent way. And before I had this on a sliding table from my micro milling machine. Now what I've done is I've created this coupling here, which is press fit on this side directly to the 25 millimeter shaft, and on this side I've put in a angular contact bearing that's mounted to the end of this ball screw. And then I've got the ball screw nut right here. On the end I've got this square collet block just to give me a handle. But as you can see, as I rotate that in and out, I get my full in and out movement. And I've put an indicator on here so that I can check how accurate it is. And even though this shaft has a slight bend in it, I'm getting about 1 to 2/100ths of a millimeter of trueness here, which is pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bottom plate for this, attach both blocks, and make a more permanent version of this lock. So this is just a piece of wood, and if I crank the nuts down, I get a friction lock on the ball screw. Because the ball screw has so little friction, you can actually push it and the screw will spin. So the way it is now, with this slightly locked down with a little bit of friction between the just on the nut here and this fixed in place, it locks everything in so that it's not going to drift this way or that way. So I still have to make a handle for this, but this is an M4 threaded bolt into the back of a split cotter that clamps onto the bar here, and that's what allows me to rotate it back and forth. So as you can see, this is free to spin because it's attached to this bearing, but when I back this off, I can move it laterally and then lock it back in place so that this no longer spins, but the shaft is free to spin into the cutter. I'm going to flatten these faces out. I had a problem when I faced these originally, but I'm going to flatten these faces out and make some bearing retainers to hold these firmly in place. I still need to figure out how to actually mount the spindle to a column. I've got a whole bunch of ideas about this. It would be nice if the spindle could rotate, and it would also be nice if I could put some linear rails on so that I could get a different kind of motion where it would be more like a surface grinder. So again, to review, I have to make a permanent base for the two bearing blocks that's attached to whatever column I come up with to mount the actual spindle itself. And I have to do the bearing retainer. I have my in-out feed, so that's done. And I think this thing will be back up and running in almost no time. While I was working on the upgrades for the grinder, and I had to move it because it was in the wrong spot. I use this all the time. I use this wheel all the time. And I made another Morse Taper 2 adapter for these sanding discs. And so as I was working on this, I thought, well, it would be nice to have this, these cups mounted in here, but it would also be nice to have those discs more easily available. And so I don't know why I can't seem to finish anything. I have a major problem with actually finishing any of these projects. But I paused this project and I actually made a completely separate grinder. So let me just show you that to you real quick. So here's what I came up with the second grinder. So I don't know if you've watched any of the other videos. When I first got the original arm, the first one was damaged. The box was all shredded up and it looked like somebody dragged it down the street behind a truck. But I didn't have the collets for these. And so I had a piece of brass, and I cut in a Morse Taper 2 collet and actually mounted it in the bearings in this tool holder. So while I was working to finish the other grinder, and I was thinking it would be nice to be able to have these discs more readily available so that I could use it all the time. I wouldn't even have to swap out the tool. I dug through all my old junk and I found this with the Morse Taper 2, and I thought to myself, oh, wouldn't it be great if I could just use this? And I had already made the collet adapter. So what I did was I took a bolt with a 10 millimeter thread on it. I chopped that off. I made this piece of steel here and Loctited that onto that shaft, and that creates a drawbar that pulls this thing tight. And then I put this GT2 belt on here, and I had this brushless motor controller. And this brushless motor, this is I think it's a 120 watt brushless motor. And then this is an old base from an old knife grinder that my father had. So what I'm going to eventually do is I'm going to make an adjustable tool rest for this. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but so I hooked the controller up and wired everything together to the hall sensors and everything. I had this left over from one of the other CNC projects, but anyway, if I turn it on, nothing works. Oh, because I didn't plug it in. So I've got my speed controller set here and an on-off switch here. And it's pretty easy to use. A little bit of brass. So that's real easy to use. It's quick to set up. It's fairly quiet. And it works a charm. And I can quickly change the discs out. So I have, I think I have 120 up to 2000 grit. So I can polish some stuff up. And I can just pop this screw out and pop another disc on. And this gives me a semi-permanent mounting for this, which I can also eventually, if I want to, I can pop this out, put it in the other spindle, which has the cup grinder on it, if I wanted to get more precise with the full working arm. So I just welded this couple pieces of scrap steel together to mount the motor and to mount the tool holder. I just have to make the adjustable tool wrench. That worked out really well. It was an easy project. I can just set this over by the other regular old style grinder, and I just have to make a box for the controller so it doesn't get a bunch of dust in it. And then the video from 2019 where I did a modification for my CNC build on my mini lathe also did quite well this year. And then coming in third place is the Whitworth 3-plate method, where for some crazy reason people wanted to watch me rub 3 plates together until they were flat. As far as like ratio, make week episode 1, while it only got a measly 61 views, I did gain amazingly 14 subscribers. And I'm sorry if I disappointed you folks by not making a second video, but that's due to the 61 views. But the ratio of likes to views was pretty impressive. And so I'm reevaluating whether or not I want to make another one of these. It's quite a lot of work to cobble together one of these videos. For 61 views, it's not really worth it. But I may do another episode if I get some more views and generate some momentum. I could possibly keep it going. So if you have any opinions about that, leave them down in the comments below. I also did a video on an adventure I had with a vise that I bought at an auction, and that had a similar high quantity of likes to views, although the views were only 63 views. But those were my most liked to viewed ratio videos. As far as stuff I'm proud of, I would say that the electronic lead screw project has progressed quite well. I use it all the time. Unfortunately, I'm a bit disappointed that nobody's seemingly tried to build one, or that at least they haven't reached out to me to have any communications about it. I think it's a pretty easy build. I may make another one for my other lathe and document how the build goes together. It's pretty simple. But you know, I took a lot of pride in being able to do this. I think the WebSocket based web interface works really, really, really well. It's much better than trying to cobble together a bunch of buttons that, you know, are hard to label and organize in a way that makes sense. And the speed is much better than flashing and trying to write it all in C or C++. So I'm pretty proud of that. I did a bunch of work with EDM, and also one of my top videos was the explanation of the circuit that I built for my do-it-yourself EDM machine. That's been torn down. I'm not actually using it. It's not in a working condition right now, but it's something I could get going again fairly easily, and I may do some more work on that in 2022. I did some more work with encoders, which is a weird hobby that I seem to be interested in. I built a rack and pinion DRO. I built a DRO with a refrigerator magnet, and I actually have that on my lathe, and I'm using that actively. It seems to be working okay. It's not perfect, but it works okay. And I also figured out how to read the current signals on a Heidenhain sine cosine encoder. And I'm pretty proud of that work, although unfortunately I haven't been able to actually attach that to anything and use it for anything. The resolution is so high that it's almost too much resolution. But it was cool to be able to figure that out and expand my knowledge of encoders. I spent a bunch of time on trying to come up with a flip dot actuator, and unfortunately I'd say that this was somewhat of a failure because it's so much work. If you want to do a four digit display, you have to make 28 different components. If it's 7 segments per digit, you got to make 28 actuators, and then you have to control them. And so I had some fun experimenting with different ways to do the actuation, but at the end of the day, it's just coming up with something that was really robust, that had an action that I liked, that wasn't too noisy. I didn't want to go through and finish it because I didn't think the result would really be what I wanted. So I did find a whole bunch of examples of mechanical displays, and a couple that I just wanted to call out were this one that I recently found from Wegster, where he milled these coils into a PCB and was able to actuate it kind of like a flip dot. I don't think this has any hysteresis, which means it is going to be kind of power hungry, but I thought this was pretty compact and pretty cool. Here's another version of that where these press in and out. And I think, like, if you had an EDM machine where you could make these segments essentially disappear when they pulled into the backing plate here, I think that would be really amazing. And then finally, this one here is just, it's nice and slow. Unfortunately, he used a servo or something really noisy to do this, but I think the motion is really nice to look at, and it's an amazing piece of work. This beautiful animation between the digit changes, I think, is amazing. But it's so much work, I just didn't want to continue. I was thinking of doing it for my subscriber count. So what else might I say about 2021? The COVID was a nightmare, and I didn't do as much stuff as I wanted. I didn't make as many videos as I wanted, but I made a decent amount of stuff. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I thank you for taking a look at the channel. I think 2022 is going to be a lot better than 2021. So for 2022, I've got the table saw, I've got the grinder upgrades. I cobbled together this, what's eventually going to be a Core XY. So this is another project that I'm going to work on. I think I have a laser that I'm probably going to mount to this, and then I might try to make a tool holder so that I could actually use it as a 3D printer as well. So that's on the list of things to do. I have 2 table saws, and I don't like either one. So I bought this for $70. It's got a nice cast iron table. It only takes an 8-inch blade, which is kind of a problem, and the fence was a total disaster. So I'm making a new fence for it. I've got that half together, and I'm gonna finish doing this fence, and then I can make the box for the controller, and then I'll get that off the bench and then go back to the other grinder. The next thing on my list of things to do is I'm going to completely tear this thing down. One of my ideas for this is to change the orientation of the spindle so that I can do some bore milling, so to flip this 90 degrees, or actually probably flip it 90 degrees so it's pointing that way, and then I can end mill some stuff. I have some ideas around doing some joinery that I think that would be pretty cool for. So if I can make essentially get rid of this headstock and make a new headstock that allows me to swivel the tool. It would be nice to have bore milling capability on this. I also want to take these rails off. They're pretty much overkill. I might take all the rails off of this and rework the mechanics to use smaller rails, because I just don't need these 20 millimeter rails. I have 15 millimeter rails on the other mill, and I'll probably swap these 20 millimeter rails out for the 15 millimeter rails. They're just shielded better as far as dust and debris. So here's these 15 millimeter rails, and they just have really worthless dust management. There's no real good shielding on those, and there's probably full of chips at this point. So I'm going to swap these out for the other 20 millimeter rails, and that's another project on the list for 2022. The last thing I want to talk about is the mini lathe that I have here. This has been on my to-do list forever. I probably won't get to it in 2022, but I bought another one of these plates, and I want to modify this plate to be able to take a ball screw and then get rid of this setup. And then I have another ball screw that I'm going to use to replace this lead screw and re-CNC this. And I bought a Raspberry Pi 4. I'm going to try to do Linux CNC, which has also been on my list of things to try out for a long time. But this is a pretty intensive project, and I'm not sure how quickly I'm going to get to it. But it's on my list, and I think fully CNCing this again, but doing a much better job, would be a pretty nice thing to have around the shop. Now, all that said, with all the list of things that I aspirationally want to do, I am really bad at finishing these projects. So I'll probably get distracted by 50 or 60 other ideas, and I may not get any of this done. But it's part of the fun of having a YouTube channel where you can do whatever you want, and you don't have a lot of viewers to piss off.
I think we have a lot to look forward to. I just want to say that I'm so thankful for the YouTube community of makers and content producers. There's so much knowledge being shared that you can learn about just about anything that you want on this platform, even if you've never done it before and you have something that you might want to share with other folks. Try to make some videos, try to share your knowledge, try to join the community, because you don't have to be someone with 1 million subscribers to make something amazing. And I think it's something that when I was a kid, we just didn't have. We probably take for granted. So thanks, YouTube. Thanks, Maker Community. Hopefully 2022 is going to be amazing. Hopefully COVID goes away and we can start to get our lives back to normal. And again, thanks for watching. Happy 2022.